Hey everyone, Cleo here, and today we're going over my December wrap-up. So as every month, I already filmed a mid-month wrap-up, so I will go very quickly over the books that I read in the first half of the month, and then I'll just go a little bit deeper into the books that I read in the second half of the month. As always, there will be 3 numbers on the screen at all times, which will be the number of books on my physical TBR. At the beginning of this month, this number was 34. The amount of credits in my book buying credit system at the beginning of this month, the number was 21. And then the amount of books read within the month, which of course at this point in time is at 0. And then as we get further along through the video, that number will be climbing. Now the month of December started off with a bang. At the midway point of the month, I had already read like 7 books. So I was like, wow, this month is going to be amazing. I'm going to get so much more done than I thought I was. But in the end, my sort of like ambitious TBR turned out to be the exact TBR I needed because I did not get anything else done within the month. And the second half of the month, logically speaking, of course, was a little bit less in terms of how much I got done because of the fact that it was the holidays and there was just so much to be done. So I spent quite a lot of time preparing for Christmas Eve dinner, for example, and doing those last minute things for the holidays, but also like doing some holiday baking and things like that. And I'm not gonna lie, during my week off, I basically did almost no reading and basically just slept a lot longer than I usually do and gamed a lot more than I usually do. So I indulged in that during my holidays instead of doing a lot of reading, which is what I expected to be doing during that week. But so before diving into the reading stats for December, let's just dive into the books that I purchased in the month of December. So I started the month with 34 books on my TBR, which was a great number because I had the goal of getting under 40, and so I was already there when the month started. But of course, the month of December is a dangerous one, and I knew what was going to come in, so I knew that I was already going to get a few extra books for that list. So in the month of December, the first thing that I'm going to mention here is basically the purchase that I should have avoided, which is There's No Such Thing as an Easy Job by Kikuko Tsumura. So this is basically an impulse buy. This book was available as sort of like opportunity purchase in my bookstore. I think because the smaller paperback had recently come out, and so perhaps that was why they were selling this one for like a super cheap price. I have had my eye on this one. I have the arc and I have still to read it. It's been over a year since I had to finish that arc. And so because of my Zero TBR project, I was just never prioritizing it. But I know that there's a high likelihood for me to like it. And I do absolutely love this cover. So I was like, if I like it, I'm gonna wanna buy it. And since it's here now for €4, let me just buy it. But so it's not the smartest of purchases that I've made in this reading year, but hey, it's one book. I'm not gonna beat myself over the head for having gone that route, but so yeah, this one was added to my TBR. The main impact to my TBR in the month of December came from a special edition, which is the Illumicrate special edition of the Greenbone Saga. This is the first book, Jade City. The 2 others have pretty similar covers, different color pattern. I really wanted this trilogy. I have been meaning to get to this trilogy for a while now, but I was pretty content to wait until I got to Zero TBR, until I saw these editions, which are very different from the original edition for this book. And so I just couldn't say no to this edition and I purchased it. And you will have seen that that book buying budget system just took a major crash because this was quite a financial investment. And as a result, I'm gonna put the slate back to 0 at the end of this year, and I'm gonna start 2022 with a 0 book buying credit again because I'm not starting in the negative in 2022, okay? I'm not doing that to myself. And then finally, the final book that I hauled during the month of December is one that I was gifted. I had been pretty clever about my wish list, so I made a sort of like wish list of what people could buy for me for Christmas, and I included a whole lot of things that weren't books. So that I was kind of hoping that a whole lot of people would go for other things and that I maybe only have to add like 1 or 2 books. And in the end, I only had to add 1 because I got 2 books, but one of them was one that I'd already read. And so I am adding 1000 Years of Joys and Sorrows by Ai Weiwei to my TBR. This is a memoir, and this is the only book that I got for Christmas that I haven't read yet. So with all of these hauled, that gets us to 39, which means that regardless of what has happened in the month of December, I am going to be able to reach my goal, which was to get under 40 books read. But let's not keep you guys waiting. Let's just already get the numbers up and running for the first half of the month. So in the first half of the month, the first thing that I finished was Dawn Shart by Brandon Sanderson. This is not a physical read. I read it in ebook, and so it does not impact my physical TBR. Then I also read For Slavikaton, The Wolf Wilder by Catherine Rundell, which I also read as an ebook on script, so it does not have an impact on my TBR. And also The Night Before Christmas by Nikolai Gogol. Same story there. I read it for Slavikaton. I read it as an ebook, so it does not impact my physical TBR. We are going down that same sort of a spiral where I'm not making any impact on those numbers, because the next thing that I finished was the X-Hex by Aaron Sterling, which I also listened to on script, so it's also another one that I don't physically own. So it didn't negatively impact my TBR, but it's also not a positive impact. At that point in time, I started to realize like, hey, we are doing a good job here, but we do also need to get that physical TBR down a little bit more to prepare for potential catastrophe at Christmas. And so I did at that point start finishing some physical reads. First thing that I finished was The Periodic Table of Feminism by Melissa Bates. So this is a book that I purchased in 2021, so it gives me 2 credits instead of the regular 1. Another one that I finished that I had going for a while was Love in the Time of Cholera by Gabriel Garcia Marquez. This is a book on my 12 books for 2021, yes, list, and so it earns me 3 credits instead of the regular 1. And then the final thing that I finished in the first half of the month was Arcanum Unbounded by Brandon Sanderson, which earns me 1 credit. So as previously indicated, at that point in time I was like buzzing. I was like thinking, oh wow, I can really tackle this TBR. Who knows where I'm going to be able to get it, because I've already done so well in the first half of the month. Though I also did know that the remainder of my TBR was a lot thicker. But I was still kind of confident that it was going to be easy, and it actually turned out to be not the case. And in part it has to do with the book that I picked up next. And so that is going to be Congo, A History by Daviton Raybrook. This is the Dutch, the original edition, but it is also translated, I believe. And so this is a non-fiction book about Congo. It deals with a very large period of time. It starts in pre-colonial history, goes over the period in which Congo was property of Leopold II, then moves into the period in which it was a Belgian colony, and then it goes over the history after the independence. And so it's a very large period of time, and that's basically what ended up ruining it for me, I think. So obviously, because of my goal of finishing my TBR and of getting to 0 TBR and the sort of like impatience that I'm starting to get with it, I think I could potentially have treated this book a little bit different as a result of that, because this is definitely not the type of book that I could speed through. I was basically getting to like 10 pages a day at most, and I could have like stuck through with that and struggled through with it. But the main reason why I decided to not give it that chance anymore was that I was feeling that I wasn't getting the things out of it that I wanted to get out of it. You know, yes, I wanted to learn more about the entire history of Congo, not just about the colonial time period. But I felt like because he was tackling such a big time period, he was going over things so quickly and mentioning so many, there was so much name dropping involved, and it just felt like he was rushing through history basically. So I felt like we were zooming in too much on like the moment and not enough on the big movement to some extent, too much on the historical chronological timeline of what is happening and not enough on like the big trends and the big observations about certain time periods. What I was most enjoying about the book were the testimonials. So the author had gone to Congo to do research, of course, and he'd also gone there to talk to people to get testimonials. And those aspects of the book I found to be most interesting. And so I felt like this one wasn't really what I was looking for. And so about 200 pages in or so, I think I wasn't there yet. I think I was like 180 or something like that probably, is when I started looking up reviews, which is for me usually a sign that I'm like close to DNFing something. And in some of the reviews that I was reading, of course I read a couple of positive reviews as well. There are definitely a whole lot of people who really love this one. It was also a bestseller in Belgium when it came out. But I did also read a few people who were saying that they found it to be a shame that in Belgium this is still like the work of reference about Congo, and that there were much better works out there. And yes, those works are more centered around the colonial period, which I at first was like, I don't want it to just be about that. But at this point in time, after having read part of his chapters on the colonial period, I know that what I was missing in his book was depth when it came to discussing the colonial period. I felt like he was just going over events and, the chronological aspect of what was taking place without really deeply going into the system and its consequences and the impact on the people there of certain decisions that were made. Yes, they were mentioned, but still I still felt like it was very surface level when it comes to that, and like he was glossing over certain things and certain atrocities that he was mentioning, that he was like saying that they didn't happen all that much. Maybe they didn't happen all that much, but I still would like to know more about it, for example. So I do think that maybe I do want to read a book focused on the colonial period solely first, and then maybe dive into more. So at that point I decided that it wasn't worth me like going through this one, kind of forcing myself through this one, because when I start to force myself through that, it means that I'm also not really taking anything in. I'm just basically reading for the sake of reading, for the sake of finishing it. And I'm not really retaining anything at that point anymore. So it's really just reading for the sake of reading, unless at a later point in time it would start to intrigue me more again. But so it's very sad. I have been meaning to read this one for a very long time. I've been intimidated by it, daunted by it. I've put it on 20,000 TBRs. But so I'm already congratulating myself for the fact that I finally did pick it up, and I did put a solid effort into it. I mean, I got to almost 200 pages into this book, It's not like I gave up on it immediately. And there were definitely some back and forth, some points in which I was like, oh yeah, but I am finding it interesting. I do want to know more about this. And the main reason why I kept on sticking through with it was because I was like, I want to learn more, but I just don't think that this is the correct book for me to do that. But in part, I definitely also just wasn't in a reading mood at that point in time. I still think that I was warranted in putting that book down, and that, I was just really having problems with taking that book in. But when it comes to like only being able to read a certain amount of pages a day, that definitely was also the case for the other book that I was reading at that point in time, and that is definitely nothing to do with the book itself. So I definitely was in a little bit of not a slump, but I was just really not in the mood to read that week. And in the end, I decided to download the audiobook for the book that I'm going to mention now, because I was just really finding it difficult to focus. I was really not in the mood to focus on reading. And so the book that I'm talking about now is A Rhythm of War by Brandon Sanderson. So this is a reread for me, and I had really been looking forward to this reread. So throughout the years, there had been multiple times in which I'd been like thinking about certain scenes that take place within this book, and it had been like, oh, wait until December. In December, I finally get to reread this one. And so when the month started and I was compiling my TBR, I was already starting to worry that I wasn't going to be able to get around to this book. And I was really like, I was determined to make it happen. I was determined that I was going to be able to do that. And things definitely were starting to look up when I did so well in the first half of the month of December. And then I completely ruined that by basically reading like 20 or 30 pages a day or something for an entire week in this. But this is an over 1,200 page book. I need a faster pace than that if I want to get through it. But downloading the audiobook for this one was definitely the right way to go, in light of the fact that I was struggling so much with focusing at that point in time. And definitely when I passed like the 500 page mark, things picked up a whole lot, because the storyline that I had been looking forward to, the one that I mainly remember about this, I mean, I remembered most of it, but the one that like immediately pops to mind when thinking of this book only really starts around page 500. So that means that, before that I was just driving on my sort of like will to get to that point. My reading pace for the book then also definitely picked up. So this is the fourth book in Stormlight Archive, so I cannot really say much about it. I also cannot give you a whole lot of premise about this one. This is an epic fantasy. At the very onset of this story, we are witnessing the assassination of the king of a specific kingdom within this world. And as a result, they go to war with an enemy race. The bulk of the story takes place 10 years later. We're mainly following three characters. One of them being, for example, a general within this army who is basically weary of this conflict that has now lasted already some 10 years. Another character we're following is a former soldier who has been enslaved and is basically kind of sent off to be fodder in the war, you know, to be the kind of like front line, the ones that they're expecting to only last for like a day or so. And the third character is actually located in a different setting. Third character is a girl called Shallan who is leaving her home, trying to secure her family's future by becoming the ward of a famous woman within this empire, while secretly planning to steal from her. I absolutely love Stormlight Archive. It is the best work that Brandon Sanderson has put out there in my opinion, and Rhythm of War is one of my favorites within that series, but as I indicated, I cannot say much about it because it's the fourth book in the series. One thing that I can say is that this is the most Cosmere heavy work of Brandon Sanderson. So if you do not know, quite a lot of Brandon Sanderson works are taking place within the same universe, the universe known as the Cosmere. And so for this particular one, you need to read everything else that he has written, basically. If you want to catch all of the Easter eggs and things like that, you need to read everything. If you don't care all that much about those Easter eggs, then maybe the most important one would be Warbreaker, because there are like multiple elements that refer back to Warbreaker compared to some of the other books within the Cosmere that are referred to within this book. But so, absolutely love this one and loved it upon reread as well. Still annoyed about the exact same things that I was annoyed about the first time. It is not a perfect read. There are definitely things that I would have liked to see handled differently. But on the whole, I definitely do love this story, this character work, this world a whole lot. And so it still is a 5-star read for me as a consequence. But so yeah, that was the final month of my reading year 2021. That was the 100 book that I finished in 2021 as well. I didn't necessarily have a goal to read 100 books, but when I got to like 99, there was no way that I was quitting at that point in time. You know, at that point in time, my fate was sealed. I was like, I need to get to 100 now, of course. But so yeah, you will have seen we ended up the month on 35 unread books to get to in 2022, which is a nice doable number. And in terms of my book buying credit system, I don't even remember where I ended on, but it will have been something like -13, I think, which, yeah. As I said, I'm going to start the slate clean. I'm starting at 0 again in 2022. The main reason why I created this book buying budget system wasn't necessarily because of the monetary value of books. I don't necessarily need to spend less on books. I just wanted to make sure that I wasn't buying a lot of books while I'm trying to reduce the TBR. And so the Greenbone saga had a disproportionate effect on my book buying budget system because of its price range rather than because of the amount of books that I was getting in return. So I don't think that I need to punish myself by taking the exact value that those books costs. I'm fine with ending the year on 0 and starting afresh in 2022. But so let me know how your month of December has gone. What have you been reading? And if you've read any of these books, definitely also let me know what you thought of them. I'm now totally ready to dive into the sort of like 2021 review videos, you know, the best books, the worst books, my stats and things like that. So those types of videos should also be coming your way shortly. But so yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video and see you guys for the next one. Bye!